Miami Hurricanes ranked 65th in the country in total defense last year. Obviously not good enough. Are we in store for a big-time bounce back?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We have company today, a show favorite. Everyone gets excited when this man joins the show. Our boy Blue, Larry Blustein, is with us, South Florida high school sports expert, 560 WQAM in Miami. Welcome, Blue. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Alex. Things winding down a little bit after the month of June just kind of wore me out. I mean, basically, almost everywhere, over 1,000 miles.
Wow.
And every school, every camp. And because of the fact that, now everything's crunched into 1 month because the NCAA only allows the member schools to go for the first, up until the end of June and then the last 4 or 5 days in July. But so you had to have to crunch everything in, and now becomes, a lot of independent things, kind of NAIA Division II schools holding stuff, but that doesn't preclude the fact that they're still really good athletes, because the fact that even those Power 5 kids, they want to do something during the month of July, so they usually tag along to all these events.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So, and Blue, I've just come to learn that Blue is always busy and he's always driving all around and traveling. So I always appreciate taking the time. And as you guys know who watch and listen to this show, Larry Blustein, much like Alonzo Highsmith, they believe in in-person scouting, that there is no substitute for watching players play in person. And some of the players we're going to talk about on Miami's defense, a lot of these are guys that you watch coming through high school. But Blue,
Right.
Before we talk about Miami's defensive personnel, I want to talk about the coaching and the schematics, okay? Because, last season, when I saw Miami had the 65th ranked total defense in the country, I was surprised they were that high. Because there was a string of games where it's like, 70, 80-yard bombs being given up left and right, 45 points being given up left and right. Last year's defensive coordinator, Kevin Steele, he's back at Alabama, and Miami brings in Lance Guidry, who is the Ragin' Cajun. I look at this guy as hopefully an up-and-coming star. His defense last year at Marshall, we saw what they did against Notre Dame, Blue, and Guidry has a great reputation. How do you see Guidry's schematics fitting with Miami's personnel?
I think it's great, and then I've had an opportunity to talk to him several times. Great guy, it doesn't matter who you are. I introduce myself to him, and I heard all about you, and I says, so we got to talking about some of the guys that he coached, just what he feels with some of the players here on board. He feels really optimistic. And I've said over and over again, you can't judge what's going to happen this year off of last year because the roster's changed almost 80%. I mean, you have more depth everywhere, and that includes defense. And, areas that you didn't last year, you were kind of thin in the secondary. You're not so much. You were kind of really thin at linebacker, and now with Mauigoa coming in along with Wesley Basaint and some of the other players to move Corey Flagg into a role where, he's been the leading tackler the last couple of years. So that kind of helps. And then up front, you have some dudes, there are a couple of young guys, but also some established players, in the mix. So he feels really good, and talking to him, he's, you get the feeling that no matter where he goes, he's going to kind of fit in with what the culture is, what their scheme is, and then he'll slowly make it to his own. You just can't come in and change everything around because these kids have had over the last 3 years, they've had 3 different defensive coordinators to learn from. So you can only, drink in what you have. And, he's that one of those guys that you'll see over the next year or so, everything will kind of fit his mold, but he's not forcing anything right now.
I thought one of the areas that has been a little problematic the last couple of years on the defense is linebacker. So I'm curious how much better you think the unit has gotten. And let me drop a few of the names here. And a lot of these guys you covered in high school, okay? Bluestein, who second half of last season, you saw him grow into his role, and they couldn't take him off the field. So he's heading into his second year now. I think Francisco Mauigoa is going to be a starter on that unit if he can beat out Corey Flagg, who is still around this coming season. We've talked, Blue, in recent weeks about KJ Cloyd, who Miami added as, I think, an important depth piece, experienced guy, good size out of Louisville. And then, you've got a big brigade of freshman linebackers coming in. I wonder how much some of these guys can play immediately, Blue. So how much better do you think that linebacker unit is going to be?
Well, everything will kind of take shape in the first couple of weeks of the summer to see who gets it and who doesn't. I mean, not that they're never going to get it, but you can't expect a kid like a Gary or one of these new kids, Brian or any of those guys to come in and all of a sudden make adjustments right away. It's just not like that. Right. But they will over time. And the one thing different this year is where Wesley was forced into a role last year that maybe he could have waited a little bit longer. I think you have that depth. You mentioned Mauigoa. I think he's one of those guys that can really make a difference. He's experienced. He's a junior. He's got, a lot of football under his skin. Now you look at Wesley with another year. Then you have Keontre Smith, who's been around, and he, even though he's I think he's like a fifth year guy. So he's been around in the system long enough. You have Chase Smith also, who, will get some playing time. And then, as you mentioned, some of the young guys like Bobby Washington Jr. and Gary and some of the kids that they recruited in the class that's really strong at the position. And you mentioned Corey Flagg, which is not terrible to have a Corey Flagg come off the bench or, be that role player for him.
Yeah. And so someone a couple guys of those young guys have been specifically asked about a lot. I think if there's one guy to me who started to really look pretty mature in the spring, I was really impressed with Bobby Washington in spring football. Now, we didn't see much of Malik Bryant in spring football because he was nursing a minor injury. But I look at Bryant as being, more of a pass rushing specialist, very physically mature type of guy. Do you think at some point, maybe not right away, like week 1, week 2, but at some point we could see guys like Washington and Malik Bryant, maybe by the latter part of the year, like Bluestein last year, these guys could be ready to get on the field a lot?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. You're right about Bobby Washington. I had mixed emotions about him early on in his career, maybe as a junior, thinking, he's got the size and he's got the speed, but he just wasn't picking up the position. But then he proved me wrong. And towards the end of the year, he might have been one of the best linebackers in the state of Florida. And, Bryant's going to take a little bit of a time. He's a bigger guy. And, obviously, Miami's going to have to use him on the outside a little bit, as you said, as a pass rusher. But the kid that piques my interest a little bit is the Gary kid. He came in and he more than looks the part. And everybody has been telling me this kid picks things up extremely well. He's a dude. And he's a guy, I think, out of everybody in that class that could zoom by, basically everybody and get himself a lot more playing time in the season because of the fact that he's a football player and he's physical and he's all business.
We're joined here by Larry Blustein, who is an encyclopedia of sports knowledge, especially South Florida high school sports. I want to talk with Blue about some of the defensive linemen and defensive backs, especially guys like Ahmad Moten, who's not brand new, but I think Moten is going to be a guy who could be hopefully set to break out this year. Joshua Horton is a true freshman on the defensive line. We got to talk some Ruben Payne and Jaden Wayne, Collins Achiampong, and Miami brought in a ton of new cornerbacks in the transfer portal. So we'll talk about these guys and more. We're only getting started here. Larry Blustein is with us on a brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Oh, I'm only getting started on FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. How about that? That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. And that's all on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There is no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, and it's America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. For the everydayers, if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, I highly suggest you sign up to our exclusive SMS texting service through Subtext. I'm including a link in the show description below, especially if you're one of those people that your Twitter's not been working so well for the past week. You can get all your recruiting updates, breaking news, one-on-ones with me on the Subtext chat. You can try it free for 14 days. Nothing to lose for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there. So you can check the link in the show description below. Alex Donno alongside Larry Blustein. Blue, I'm fascinated to watch Miami's defensive line, loaded with pass rushers, some unproven guys in the interior. Let me start with Ahmad Moten, Blue, because that's someone who, didn't have much of an impact last season, but I see him growing, maturing. I thought Moten had a really good spring, and defensive tackle is an area where on paper, Miami is not as deep in the interior. Do you think someone like Moten is ready to take the next step?
Excuse me. Here's a guy that I've watched ever since he pretty much started playing. He was a freshman at Piper, then transferred to Cardinal Gibbons. And as I watched him in his senior year, he kind of reminded me of a guy that Miami used to have from Ely, Taraz McCray. A guy who is like a space eater, strong, tough to move around if you're a center or a guard because of the fact that he's such a big guy. And I think that he started to get it in the spring. And he's definitely going to be one of the players that's going to emerge only because of the fact that he adds quality depth, not just depth, but quality depth. And he's going to get in there and he's going to make plays. And the coaching staff's going to evaluate. And then he's going to get more playing time and then more playing time. So he's definitely one of the guys that I'm looking for.
And, another guy that I wonder how much we'll see him his first season, Joshua Horton, who's an incoming true freshman, big program up in the Atlanta area, Langston Hughes. He's looked really good, I've heard, in the offseason program. He was not here for spring football, was not an early enrollee, but looking good in the offseason program. Hopefully Miami doesn't need to rush him in too quickly, but how do you project out Joshua Horton at Miami?
Well, you made a good point. I mean, last year at this time, he may have been pressed into playing time earlier than he really should have. And this year he's going to be able to kind of wait back because of, as you mentioned, I mean, you have so much talent. I mean, you take a look at the Branson Deen kid and Leonard Taylor and even Thomas Gore, who comes in as
Anthony
an experienced
Campbell as well.
guy. Yeah, and then you start out with a guy who I think has progressed as well as anybody in Jared Harrison Hunt, a big body guy who has a lot of experience behind him, and Jacob Lichtenstein, who is another one, and it goes on and on. I mean, guys like on the outside like Jafari Harvey and then Nigel Lee Kelly, who I'm extremely excited to see, because here's somebody that's grown not just physically but mentally as well. And then we're all waiting for Cyrus Moss to add weight, but while he does, if you watched him in the spring, he had a great spring game because of the fact that he's a player, and they knew that last year. And I'm sure they've put him, on one of those diets that, even they have to wake him up in the middle of the night to eat ice cream, but whatever it is, he needs to gain his weight. And then you have a Key Messidor, who I really, really think a lot of. And remember Chance Williams, he's still there. I mean, he's still having an opportunity. And then you mentioned Ruben Bain, who is the guy, just that right now they can afford to get him in the mix, but not make him do things that he's not ready for.
Let's talk about the safeties. Now, safety, I think it's more about the experience than it is about the newcomers, right? Because Cam Kinchens, All-American, was arguably the best safety in the country last year. And James Williams has potential through the roof. He's just not put it together consistently, right? So if you look at that safety duo, and I see all the analytics, right? Pro Football Focus, they've got, as returning safeties this year, they have Miami with 2 of the top 5 guys, with Cam Kinchens and James Williams, both ranked as top 5 guys with the analytics. How good do you think that duo can be this year, that starting safety duo under Guidry?
Really well, especially his scheme, the way he, his front seven. You see, that's the whole thing. It's in any really good defense. You look at a defense like Alabama's or Georgia's, it's a lot predicated on how the front seven does. And with Miami, they've improved so much in that front seven, especially at the linebacker position. It's going to make the safety position a lot easier to kind of not have to do everything. And, you have like the Markeith Williams and, I remember watching him and, at Evans and, a kid that could play. And then you have Caleb Spencer coming in, a guy that we had talked about last year as a guy that I had an opportunity to see up close and personal at that Broward Showcase last year when his team came in. I mean, and then obviously Brian Ballum, who's coming into his 3rd year, is grown, is matured, and is picking it up. So you take a look at those guys. I mean, especially at the safety position, and I think there's 5 guys in that rotation right to begin with, that are really good. And then you build from that. And that's why I say, when someone tells you to project what Miami's going to be this year, it's hard to tell because they made such turnover, and the chemistry is going to be so much different than it was last year.
Yeah, and when it comes to corner, there's a lot of new faces, right? We look at Davonte Brown, who I'm sure you covered at American Heritage, who transfers in from UCF. I expect him to hold down a starting spot. Based on the way spring football went, Daryl Porter might be the other outside starter, but you've got a lot of new faces coming in. Jadais Richard from Vanderbilt, who I like. Demetrius Freeney comes in. You got some freshmen like Damari Brown and Robert Stafford. Jaden Davis comes in from Oklahoma. I'm sure, you covered him. He's a South Florida kid as well. Yeah. How do you feel about the cornerback room?
Really good. And like you said, I thought that Daryl Porter had a really, really good spring. He did extremely well. I thought the game was, outstanding. And then you look at the 2 kids, you look at Malik Curtis, who, came over from Bishop Verot, that a lot of people, have said, hey, listen, we haven't even taken, the wrapping off of this kid. And then you had, as you mentioned, Jaden Harris and Corey Couch and, guys who are capable of playing either the nickel and in this scheme, probably the nickel position in this scheme. And you have a lot of names. You mentioned a couple of kids that are coming in through the portal. And that's what I said, it's easy to look at the freshmen come in and say, okay, well, it's going to take time. But then you inject some of those portal kids who have experience, and then all bets are off because you don't know their experience playing the game from a physical and mental standpoint really could change the playing field real quickly. And, a lot of them become role models for these young freshman guys and guys that you never even expected. Did you ever expect, Davonte Brown to walk in the door? No, you didn't. So here's a kid that's, a senior, but at the same time, he can be that guy, that the younger kids, like the Malik Curtises and Jaden Harris and guys like that look towards, for guidance, and even his own brother. I mean, a guy who I think, it's just that the whole complexion changes with this team, with all these portal guys, and that's what makes the portal so interesting. Obviously, some teams don't like it because they lose kids, right? And some teams do like it because they gain that much needed experience at a spot that would probably be a 1 or 2 year waiting game for a lot of these kids to learn and mature and grow. But now they don't have to do that because the portal's, kind of gift wrapping you kids that are college ready already.
So, I mentioned last season, Miami in their 5-7 campaign had the 65th ranked total defense last year. If we're hoping, Blue, that this team can improve to, let's say, the 8-win range from the 5-win range last year, how much better numbers wise do you think that defense has to get? Does it have, because I think it has to be like a top 20, top 25 at worst type of deal. I think they have to improve about 40 spots to really become a team that can have success last year, because the schedule's not easy, right? I mean, you got tough games against Clemson, at Florida State, Texas A&M. It's not going to be a cakewalk. North Carolina, NC State. It's a tough schedule. I think they've got to have a top 25 defense at worst.
Well, and laugh it off if you want. And they've had a horrible time at Boston College, no matter how good or bad Boston College is. We came into last year thinking that Middle Tennessee State game would be a blowout, but remember, it could come down. Miami could have a 6-7 win season in the balance for that last game. And, how do they react? And I know that fans want Rome to be built in a day. It's just really not. It's not in the cards. You just got to understand, you come off a 5-win season where you've played horribly in basically every game but the Georgia Tech game. And, and actually the Texas A&M game. But a lot can be said for the defense, just like the offense, how they get out. And if they can get out to a 4-5-0 start, then all things change, because there's a lot of confidence in there. There's not a lot of finger pointing, because you can almost guarantee, no matter what anybody wanted to tell you, after they lost to Middle Tennessee State and played horribly against Southern Mississippi, there were some people who weren't accountable for what was going on.
It's been a couple weeks since we've had Larry Blustein on. So when we come back, I want to get Blue's take on a couple of South Florida kids who are the newest verbal commits to Miami's defense in the class of 2024. The South Florida ones. Lightfoot, we will discuss again on another day from Chicago, but I want to talk about Romanas, OJ, Frederique, who's now at St. Thomas Aquinas, and another STA defensive back, Ryan Mack, who's committed to Miami within the last couple weeks. So you want to keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. And for the everydayers, we're going to talk more recruiting tomorrow with Brian Smith from allhurricanes.com and the Locked On podcast, one of our recruiting experts. We're going to have an episode on Saturday with the greats. Chalupa, Batman, and Hoodie Girl are going to join us. So for the everydayers, you're in for a treat for the rest of the week. And you guys are all in for a treat today with Larry Blustein on with us. So Blue, within the past week and a half, Miami lands a St. Thomas Aquinas defensive back duo. One of those started his career at Deerfield, just transferred to STA, and that's Romanas. We call him OJ. Frederique is in, and Ryan Mack being the other one. What can you tell me about these players who I know you've covered up close and in person many a time?
Frederique's a physical guy. I mean, he's a great athlete. When he came over, a lot of people were saying who, because people didn't understand because of the fact that, Deerfield hasn't been in the mix in a while. So he didn't get the spotlight that he deserved. But this is a guy, if you go back to his freshman year, was somebody that that we had talked about as being a guy who can make a difference. And he will. I mean, this year he's going to be kind of in a position with St. Thomas where he has a load of talent around him. So he's going to be able to be eased into that and be able to play at his own pace and get an opportunity to do some really, really good things. I like him a lot. I think he's rangy. He's an athletic type of kid he's one of those guys that Miami can stockpile for the next couple of years and then break them out when needed.
Now, what about Ryan Mack? Because one of the things about Mack, I see him as more of a corner. For some of the recruiting services have him listed as a safety. What kind of a role do you see Ryan Mack playing at Miami?
He's a legacy kid. I mean, obviously his dad, Rod, played at Miami and Monsignor Pace, and kid has been playing this game at a high level for a long time, even at the youth football league level. He's used to playing everywhere. So right now, people are kind of confused of where he's going to play. He's got the hips, loose hips to play corner. He's got the athletic ability. He's not overly big for a safety position, but that sometimes doesn't mean anything if you know how to play the position. He's one of those guys that wherever you need him, plug and play him, he can do it. And like I said, he's been around this game all of his life. A lot of these kids, you say, oh, I've been around it all my life. No, he's really been around it. Rod coached the great Ravens team with all those kids from Chaminade, and they were excellent at youth football. So they came through. They were like national champions. So they came through the ranks at playing this game at a very, very, very high level. So I think you watch him play and he gets it. He's got the quickness. He's got the instincts. He's strong. So wherever they play him, he's going to, excel. So it depends when he comes in where Miami wants to use him. Like I said, there's a lot of guys that could play that safety spot, and you go, oh, well, he could cover. Yeah, but his hips might not be loose. He might be kind of more, of a James Williams type of guy where he could never play corner. Right. He's got the size to play a safety position or even a outside linebacker position. But I think that he fits in really, really well.
I love it. You guys want to make sure you follow this man on Twitter at Larry Blustein and check out his awesome radio show. It is the most informative show. If you're into this kind of stuff, right? If you're watching us right now, you're probably into recruiting and you're into college sports. And honestly, there's no better show on the radio for that than Larry Blustein's show, the South Florida High School Sports Show. What can we expect on your next episode this coming Monday, Blue?
Oh, we're moved to Wednesday now. What? For some reason, and I don't ever remember before, but WQAM's covering summer basketball.
Wow.
I don't think we've ever had that before, but whatever it is. We'll be on Wednesday, and we're going to have a really, really good show like we've had. A lot of high school coaches, a lot of the athletes. So, and we also go around to all the colleges around the state of Florida, USF, UCF, Miami, to check in and see how they're doing during the summer. And we'll have that again this coming week.
It really is a great show. And every now and then I make a cameo on the show. So you want to tune in each and every
week. A good
week.
one, too.
I appreciate that. Larry Blustein is the man. Thank you guys so much. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, Google, wherever you get your pods. If you're watching the video version, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the thumbs up button, the like button, and we'll talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.